We often speak of Africa as one people, one identity, one shared story. But what happens when an African student crosses a border within Africa and still feels foreign? My name is Nneka Ene, a PhD student of clinical psychology at Daystar University. This study examines the acculturation stress experienced by foreign African students in Kenyan universities. A core inquiry of the study is, does shared African identity guarantee smooth cultural adaptation? The growth of intra-African student migration is in line with the African Union Agenda 2063, a 50-year strategic framework from 2013 to 2063 for transforming Africa into global powerhouse, aiming for inclusive sustainable development, regional integration, and political unity. In the intracontinental student mobility, Kenya has positioned herself as a key education hub for African students. The assumption of sameness, the so-called myth of the monolith, the belief in a unified African identity, hides real cultural differences that increase the acculturation stress in African students who come to Kenya from other African countries to study. The acculturation stress has been found to greatly impact the mental wellness of these foreign African students. Recent findings introduce the proximity paradox. Foreign African students expect minimal cultural differences in other African countries. But when these differences are moderate, yet they are unanticipated, it results in psychological shock, and this shock is intense. The study employed a narrative review of peer-reviewed literature and doctoral theses published between 2020 and 2025. The findings indicate that foreign African students experience significant acculturation stress, primarily due to language barriers, culture shock, and a perceived discrimination. The existing evidence challenges the monolith myth by demonstrating that stress levels vary significantly across individuals, regardless of age, marital status, or education levels. Based on these findings, the study concludes that most foreign African students arrive in Kenya with limited emotional and psychological preparedness for the challenges of cultural transition. Acculturation stress is defined as the psychological strain of adapting to a new culture. John Berry's theory was designed in 1997, and he designed the acculturation model that provides the main theoretical framework for this study. The model argues that individuals navigating a new culture adopt one of four strategies based on how they balance their original identity with the host culture. These strategies are: the first is integration, where individuals maintain their home culture while engaging with the host culture, and this makes for a richer cultural experience and cultural identity. Assimilation is the next, where the individuals abandon their home culture in favor of the host culture. The third is separation, where the individuals maintain their home culture and avoid the host culture. And the final is marginalization, where individuals lose contact with both the host culture and their culture, and they are sort of in a psychological no man's land. In the African context, students would often be pushed towards assimilation, which, like we said, is not the best for the student. Their own identities become minimized, and there is the emotional cost to that pressure. The findings of this study challenge the belief that intra-African migration guarantees smooth adaptation. Foreign African students in Kenyan universities experience significant acculturation stress. One of the most common stresses is language. While English may be the academic language, everyday interactions often occur in Swahili and Sheng. For students from West and Central Africa, this creates subtle but powerful exclusions in lecture theaters, in cafeterias, and in social spaces. Beyond language, social norms differ. Communication styles, expectations of assertiveness, and even humor may vary across regions of Africa. Behaviors perceived as confidence in one culture may be misinterpreted as arrogance in another culture. Financial stresses further intensify their vulnerability. Some foreign students are expected as international students to be affluent simply because they are international. These micro-frictions accumulate. The psychological impact is measurable. These students exist in what this study describes as a psychological no man's land, not foreign enough to receive specialized support, and yet not local enough to feel fully at home. Research shows correlation between acculturation stress and depression, anxiety, social withdrawal, and isolation, and emotional fatigue. More importantly, stress levels are not uniform. They vary depending on age, financial stability, marital status, emotional preparedness, and access to social support. Despite these challenges, the findings also highlight protective factors. To mitigate these challenges, the study recommends implementing peer-based support systems, including community networks, to provide essential coping mechanisms that buffer against acculturation stress and mitigate depression, anxiety, and social isolation. Informal support systems. These can provide emotional security, cultural familiarity, and shared understanding. Students who develop strong social networks demonstrate lower levels of depression and greater psychological adjustment. A few recommendations. Universities must move beyond uniform integration systems. There is a need for structured, culturally sensitive psychosocial programs, and two would be better than one. There should be a pre-arrival emotional preparedness program, sort of like an orientation pack. And secondly, a post-arrival structured mentorship system, like a Big Brother program, to make sure that new students are assimilated properly into the system. There should be formal peer networks. And finally, a recognition of the diversity within Africa. In conclusion, Africa is not culturally uniform. It is not a monolith. We share geographical borders, but not cultural ones. True Pan-Africanism requires psychological awareness, a belonging that must be intentional. And until we acknowledge the diversity in our unity, foreign African students will continue to struggle silently in spaces that promised belonging.